Likelihood of parent-adult-child co-residence affects the family structure and parental characteristics by William S. Aquilino. So basically in this article, their main focus is they're going to be studying the parental characteristics, child characteristics, and family structure characteristics that can either increase or, decrease the likelihood of having an adult child co-reside in the parental home. Now into the literature review. So in the literature review, he goes on to say how research on on parent, adult, child, and parent co-residency has mostly focused on either the causes of the co-residency or the consequences of the co-residency. He says that this research is particularly weak because when the research has tended to focus on the cause of the co-residency, it's relied on partial models that focus on the child's characteristics, but that when the main goal of the study is to study the consequences of the co-residency, they've used the partial models that focus on parental characteristics. And he says that this research is also weak because they're relying on untested assumptions about which generation is more dependent within the relationship, and they've assumed that the parent's position in the life course assumed to indicate whose need are being met by the co-residency. So he says that the main bulk of the research on this subject is weak and limited. And then he goes on to say that the studies that have predicted the likelihood of co-residency have tended to focus on child characteristics, with co-residency viewed as an aspect of children's transition to adulthood, rather than viewing co-residency as happening as a result of something something else. And he says that although they've examined these things, there has been less attention given to the parental characteristics or the family structure characteristics that can affect or determine or increase the likelihood of having the adult child co-reside in the home. He says that there is much need for research that estimates the effects of parents' marital history, education, income, health, and family size and household composition, all as to examine all of these as factors or determinants of the co-residency. He says that the research available has made several different assumptions about the nature of the co-residency, and depending upon the parent's position in the life course or in the household of that co-residing home. He says that these assumptions that these researchers are making have rarely been tested, and the researchers have often failed to consider householder status in discussing the dependency within the co-residency. He says that the extent and the origin of racial and ethnic differences in co-residency remain largely unknown, and this is one of the gaps in the literature, he claims. He says that although there's a considerable amount of literature and research on racial and ethnic differences within household structure, that this information has not been applied directly and specifically to models that predict the propensity of parents and adult children living together. He says that in order to research this topic the right way, that researchers must go in a more comprehensive the researchers must take a more comprehensive approach, and that they should, one, consider the likelihood of co-residency from the parent's perspective, two, test assumptions concerning generational needs, dependency, and the likelihood of co-residency, three, include child, parent, and family characteristics, and family structural characteristics, and lastly, account for racial and ethnic differences within the propensity of the co-residency. He says all these things, and he goes on to say that this is what the research is missing, and this is what his article will be hitting and talking about, since he views them as gaps in the already existing research. He can even then continues to talk on his literature review, saying how although there is plenty empirical evidence that co-residence meets a young adult's needs assumptions meets young adults' needs, that there has been assumptions concerning elderly parents' needs have rarely been verified. He says that research on intergenerational economic transfers calls into question the assumptions of the dependency based only on the parent's age. He also says that there is very little known about the influence of family structure or parental characteristics on the probability of the co-residency. So after all of that, he goes on to say how because of all of this lack of research, he also says that research, he also says that how research relevant to the discussion of racial and ethnic ethnicity and ethnic differences, when focusing that on parent-adult-child co-residency, is very rarely found, and when it is found, it's only on the extended family formation, and it's just very limited on this specific topic. So basically, he goes on to say how since there's so much lack of research on these things, that his study will be examining the parental, will be taking a more comprehensive approach in his research, and he will be examining the parental, child, and family structure characteristics that as determinants of the co-residency. He also will be examining ethnic and racial differences to see if that has any effect on the co-residency as well. So that's basically the whole gist of the literature review. Now onto the methods. So basically the data from this article was taken from the 1987-88 National Survey of Families and Households. And this survey collected detailed family life interviews from about 13,017 respondents who were selected through a multi-stage area probability sample of the counter minus of the from the United States. I'm sorry. He says that personal interviews averaged about 102 minutes in length and were conducted from March 1987 to May 1988. And they chose one respondent per household. They were randomly selected, and they were aged from 19 or over, and they had to be living in the household. Excuse me. The population of interest for this study was defined as all parents who had at least one living child or stepchild aged 19 or over co-residing in the parental home. So now onto the results. In this cross-sectional study, I'm going to be talking only about the major findings because they did have a lot of little findings, but I'm going to be hitting mostly the major findings since that's the most important part of the article. So basically, in this cross-sectional study, the incidence of co-residence was first they had a study that examined the extent of the co-residency, and they found that the incidence of co-residency is quite high across age ranges of parents, and that the proportion of parents with co-resident adult children was highest for younger parents and parents in midlife. They also tested the dependency and householder status. They found that parents' position in the life course did not in and of itself indicate the presence or direction of dependency in the relationship with co-resident adult children. They found that the vast majority of parents of adult children in the sample, which was about over 96%, maintained their own households. Less than 5% of the elderly parents and less than 1% of the parents below age 65 lived in an adult child's household. He says that there was very little evidence that adult children lived in the parental household in order to care for their parents. They found that parental income and health were not related to the likelihood of co-residency when considering other factors inside the model. excuse me. They found that parents who had lost their spouses through widowhood or marital breakups were less likely to have a co-resident child within the home um, than the currently married parents. And this suggests that co-residence living arrangements met the needs of children more than of the parents. They also found that marital status of adult children was one of the strongest predictors of co-residency, and that having one or more unmarried adult child dramatically raised parents' risk of having an adult child in the home. They also found big result the majority of the result was that the net of the children's age, sex, and marital status, family structure were all highly related to the propensity of parents and adult children to co-reside. They found that parents' marital dissolution and remarriage decreased the likelihood of having adult children in the home. So basically, adult children were less likely to live in the parental home if there was a step parent present in that home. In this study, they found very little support for the notion that cultural preferences explain the high proportion of co-residency in the households among minorities than among whites. So there was also no evidence of cultural preference for co-residency amongst blacks. So basically, after children's marital status was controlled, black parents with unmarried adult children appeared no more likely than other parents to have adult children in the household. So basically, they didn't find a lot of difference with the cultural and racial aspect that they studied. So basically, that's like the majority and the major findings of this study.